the Keynesian economic theory is that if you get into a recession, regardless of the cause, the answer is the people should spend more money and borrow more money. What if you don't have a job? Or what if you maxed out on your credit cards? And what if you can barely make your payments? You can't spend more money. And they say, well, we have an answer for that. Then the government has to spend more money. Well, where's the government going to go? Well, we'll raise taxes. What if you can't raise taxes? That'll be a problem. Let's borrow more money. Well, there's a limit. The interest rates will go up if you borrow too much. They have a secret. We'll just print the money, and then we'll keep spending it. And that is supposed to be the solution. So they actually believe that it's absolutely necessary to spend more money under these conditions, and it's wrong to back off and save. But capital comes from saving. Capital doesn't come from increasing the money supply, and it's a major fallacy. If an individual is deeply in debt and living beyond their means, or if you're in a company and you're going bankrupt and you don't have anybody that's going to bail you out, you know you have to cut back. And if the debt is consuming you, there's no economic growth. So debt has to be liquidated. You have to get the prices back down. You have to get back to scratch and go back to work. An individual has to cut spending, sell a car, get another job, pay down the debt, then get back to economic growth again. But they don't believe that is true to government. I happen to believe that is true. If you live beyond your means as a nation, you'll live beyond your means. But the big problem is even if you could convince them, the politicians can't cut anything because everybody's a special interest. And for decades now, they have been rewarded. If they voted for the spending and they voted to bring something back home, they got rewarded and got reelected. But it's different now. The recessions were shorter-lived, and there was still some wealth, but we've undermined the system. We've undermined the dollar. We've undermined the principles. We're overextended just about everywhere, so it's not going to work. That's why this has to be addressed in a fundamental way. You can't tinker around the edges. You can't tinker and say we're going to cut the proposed increases. So we have to look at this entitlement system. The entitlement system doesn't work. The entitlement system is based on a presumption that we can help people who are having trouble. We don't want anybody to fall through the cracks. I think most of the people in Washington that vote for it are well-intended, but they have a lousy understanding of economics, is what I think the problem is. But they're well-intended. They say, well, we have to take care of people. I mean, what if somebody doesn't have medical care? Are you going to put them out in the streets? Well, I practiced medicine in early 1960s, and there was no Medicare or Medicaid, and I worked in a church hospital, and people weren't put out in the streets. But now it's different. People have this idea that if you need it, it's a right. If you demand it, it's a right. And if it's either one, it's an entitlement. So if you need medical care or demand it, and somebody else has it, you have a right to it, somebody has to provide it to you for free. If you need a house, they'll provide it for you. And look at what happened in the housing bubble. How about education? Oh yes, we'll loan them money or do whatever we can. So we have an educational system that is deeply flawed. Right now there are 600,000 jobs in this country going begging, but we don't have people trained for the job. So the educational system isn't doing well. So we graduate more students, but we can graduate more students, and they have $1 trillion of debt. There's more debt from the students than there are on credit cards. And guess what? Even the ones who are ready and anxious to pay their debt and get that behind them, they can't get a job. So all this entitlement system and this feeling that we can help people and give them something for free, there is nothing for free. What it does though is undermines the system. And we have lost confidence and faith, and we don't know the economic history, that it's an absolute fact that the freer a country, the wealthier the country. And under those conditions, the freer the country, the larger the middle class there is. And we did at one time have the largest middle class in the history of the world and the richest middle class. But that's not true anymore. If there is wealth around and you see it, believe me, there is debt behind it. And that's why it's unsustainable. So this is the reason we have to challenge it, whether it's for housing or education or whatever. The system is not working. I think that's why a lot of people are paying a lot more attention to the thoughts of personal liberty and economic liberty. But in medical care in particular, it's a real mess. I had experience of practicing medicine before we had it, and medicine has gotten much worse. And everything government has done has interfered with the doctor-patient relationship, and that is what should drive medicine, the doctor and the patient relationship. The doctor, lo and behold, always charged the least. Now, when there's third-party payment, whether it's insurance companies or government or whatever, doctors, hospitals, everybody, the forms are filled out and they always charge the maximum because of the way the system is. The labs do it, the hospitals do it, and then because of the inflation, they never can pay their bills, and then the government comes in and they put price controls on it, and it becomes a real mess. And less people get care under socialized medicine. Now, there's a lot of proposals going around. There was one that was introduced and passed in these last 3 years. I think it's called Obamacare or something like that. It solves no problems. It makes the problem worse. But what did the last administration do? Did they fight for free market medicine? No, they gave us prescription drug programs, which is insolvent. They're not paying the bills either. Well, we got to give free drugs to everybody. It just goes on and on. And it's unsustainable. Medicare is in worse shape than Social Security, and it is not going to last. So I argue the case that we have to have priorities, we have to cut spending, but I haven't put on the top of my list of priorities that we cut medical care benefits for the elderly who have become dependent on the federal system, as well as children's health care. I don't think we should start with that, even though I don't think they should have been started. But now that there's dependent, we ought to be able to work our way out of it. But the only way we can do this, to preserve some of the medical care and to wean ourselves off, is to save the money someplace else. And of course, where I would start is saving hundreds of billions of dollars on the overseas spending. Now, to encourage more private medicine, there's things that we can do under these circumstances. There's all types of changes in the tax code that we could make, where if the individual would assume responsibility for themselves, that they get all their money back by taking a tax credit off their taxes and get the government out of the business of management. These savings accounts are really worthwhile, but Obamacare and these other things just undermine that and make it more difficult. You're not allowed to have one if you're 65 and this sort of thing. But the system basically works, especially a young person. If you're a young person, you don't think you have to have medical care for every single thing or insurance for every single thing, and then the mandates the government puts on to include all kinds of things. Oh yeah, the insurance company have to take care of every single thing. Well, that's not insurance then. That's a mandate that eliminates the insurance quality. But if a young person had the chance of putting $3,000 or $4,000 or $5,000 in a bank account and got to write it off, and he uses that money directly to pay his bills and go directly to the doctor and stay out of the emergency room for those cares, it would be much better. Believe me, the prices would come down. You should have as much competition as possible. And the doctor-patient relationship is very important. But even in the practice of medicine, what they're having now with these changes going on, it costs thousands of dollars for the doctors to sign up and be able to coordinate all the medical information with the government. The government wants to know everything about a patient and medications and find out exactly what the doctor's prescribing. They want to monitor. But is it wise physicians that are doing this monitoring? No, it's a bunch of bureaucrats over in Washington that are going to do this. And it's going to cost a lot of money. And there's going to be a lot more doctors getting very angry and upset with this. And I predict right now, if this continues, there's going to be a lot more doctors that won't take Medicare or Medicaid at all, compounding our problem. We need to get the relationship of the doctor and the patient back together again and get the government and the corporations out of the middle. If we want to get our house in order and our financial house back on shape again, we do have to cut. But the overseas spending, which I talk about a whole lot, doesn't get cut unless we change our philosophy. We have to change our philosophy about the entitlement system. If nobody will consider the fact that we as individuals should be more responsible and not assume somebody else will take care of us from cradle to grave, that attitude, won't allow us to do the things necessary. We'll just get deeper and deeper into poverty. They'll keep spending it, and we're going to have runaway inflation. It's going to be a mess. That's why it's important that we address this. But there's no reason why we shouldn't be able to bring both liberals and conservatives, Republicans and Democrats and independents together about stopping all this spending and all these wars overseas. And why don't we agree to just bring our troops home? The wars that we've been fighting are fought with no declaration. Presidents make the decision, Congress defers to the executive branch and allows the president to do it. But I can promise you, as president, I would never fight a war that is not endorsed by the people through a vote by the Congress. World War II, we were attacked by Japan and the Germans declared war against us. In less than 4 years, we were able to defeat both of them. These were huge fights that we had to. We've been in Afghanistan for 10 years, and nobody knows when it's going to end. It keeps getting worse. And the more information we get out of, the more we are hearing from the military personnel, the more we find out that things aren't going well there. One indication, though, that should give a hint, but nobody outside of the people that might come to hear me will admit it, that is, the military people know exactly what I'm talking about, and they endorse this foreign policy about ending the war. And they do that by sending more money to our campaign than 4 times more than all the Republicans put together and twice as much as the president gets. So that's a pretty strong indication that it also reflects the fact that maybe it helps a little bit having served